Okay.
And there's also other related APIs like the cache to allow me to tag this or validate the specific cache entry granularly, or define my validation period. But for this demo, let's just focus on the plain directive. Now that I have this use cache directive, I can actually remove my suspense boundary around this hero. And that means, well, what this will do is that partial pre-rendering can actually go ahead and include this in the statically pre-rendered shell, so that this hero will, in this case, be a part of my build output. Let's do the same thing for everything else on this page that can be shared. For example, I have this feature categories over here. Let's go ahead and do the same there. And add the use cache directive and mark this as cached, like that. And we can remove the suspense boundary. We're not going to need this anymore. Same for the feature products. Let's add use cache and mark this as cached. Oops. And then remove the suspense boundary. So notice how much complexity I'm just able to remove here. I don't have to worry about my skeletons, my cumulative layout shift that I was doing before. And the page is no longer, or we no longer have this page level static versus dynamic limitation. So now when I load this page, you'll see everything here is cached except for this truly user-specific content. Right. So that's pretty cool. Let's go to the browse page and do the same thing over there. Yeah, I already marked all of my boundaries here, so you can easily understand what's happening. And I want to at least cache these categories. Looks like I'm getting an error, though. Maybe you recognize this. So it means I have a blocking route, and I'm not using the suspense boundary when I should be doing it. Refreshing this, that's true, huh? This is really slow, and it's causing performance issues and bad UX. So this is great. Use cache or cache components is helping me identify my blocking routes. Let's actually see what's happening inside that. So this is the problem, right? I'm fetching this category's top level, and I don't have any suspense boundary above it. Basically, we need to make a choice. Either we add a suspense boundary above, or we opt into caching. Let's do the simple thing first and just add a loading TSX here. And let's add a loading page over here, some nice skeleton UI. That's pretty good. It resolved the error, but I don't have anything useful happening on this page while I'm waiting. I can't even search. So with cache components, dynamic is like, or static versus dynamic is like a scale. And it's up to us to decide how much static we want in our pages. So let's shift this page more towards static. And just delete this loading TSX again. And then utilize the patterns that we were learning earlier to push this data fetch into the component and co-locate it with the UI. So move this down into my responsive category filters here. I have two because of responsive design. I can actually go ahead and just add it here. Oops. And import this. I don't need this prop anymore. Actually, my component is becoming more composable. And instead of suspending it, let's just add the use cache directive. And that should be enough. So notice how I'm being forced to think more about where I'm resolving my promises. and actually improving my component architecture through this. I don't need to suspend this. This will just be included in the static shell here.
Oh, I was muted and I'll say something. So this makes a lot of sense.
List,
Components,
keep this
the
fresh.
cache components, something.
So I can reload that every time. Whereas the categories at the bottom, I also want to cache this. So let's go ahead and go to the footer. And since I'm using the donut pattern over here, this can actually be cached, even though it's inside this UI, part of the UI that's interactive. So this is totally fine. So that pattern was not only good for composition, but also for caching. I think I have one more error there. Let's see what that is. Still have this error. This is actually because of these search params. Search params, as we know, is a dynamic API. I can't cache this, but I can resolve it deeper down to reveal more of my UI and make it static. So let's go ahead and move this down, pass it down as a promise to the product list. We'll make this typed as a promise over here, like that. Let's resolve it inside the product list, use the resolved search params over here and over here. And since this is suspended, here, the error will be gone. So reloading this, the only thing that's reloading here is just the part that I picked specifically to be dynamic. Everything else can be cached. And that means that I can interact with my banner or even search because that part has been already pre-rendered. All right, let's do the final page here, which is the product page, which is the most difficult and the most important one. It's really bad right now. This is like super important for an e-commerce platform, apparently. All right, let's go ahead and fix that one too. So here, I have this product page. Let's start caching just the reusable content here, for example, the product itself, and just add use cache here and mark this as cached. That should be fine. That means we can remove the suspense boundary over here. All right, and this is no longer reloading on every request here, right? For the product details, let's do the same thing. Let's add use cache. Let's mark it as cached. And see if that will also work. It did not. Actually, this is a different error. It's telling me that I'm trying to use dynamic APIs inside of this cached segment. And that is true. I'm using the save product button, right? That allowed me to click and toggle the saved state. So what do you think we can do with this? We can use the donut pattern again. Actually, we can also slot in dynamic segments into cache segments. So we're interleaving them just like before, but with cache. So this is pretty cool. Let's go ahead and add the children here, like that. And this will remove the error. And I can just wrap this around this one dynamic segment of my page here, remove the suspense boundary, and add in just a very small bookmark UI for that one dynamic piece of the page. And let's see how that looks now. So notice how almost the entire UI is available, but I have this one small chunk that is dynamic, and that's fine. Everything else is still there. And let's leave the reviews dynamic because we could keep those fresh. There's still one more error. Let's just quickly tackle that. Again, this is the params. I'm getting help that I need to make a choice, either add a loading fallback or cache this. Let's just use generate static params in this case. Kind of depends on your use case and your data set, but for this case, I'm just going to add a couple pre-rendered, predefined pages, and then just cache the rest as they're generated by users. And this will remove my error here. So I think I'm actually done with my refactor. Let's go ahead and have a look at the deployed version and see what that looks like. So I just deployed this on Vercel. And remember, I purposely slowed down a lot of data fetches here. And still, when I load this page initially, it's just, everything is just available already, right? The only thing here is just those few dynamic segments, like the discounts and the for you. Same with the browse all of the UI is already available. And for the product itself, it's just instant, right? And remember, again, that all of these cache segments will be included with the static shell with partial pre-rendering. And it can be prefetched using the improved prefetching in the new Nextjs client router. So that means that every navigation it just feels so fast, right? All right, to summarize, with cache components, there is no more static versus dynamic. And we don't need to be avoiding dynamic APIs or compromising dynamic content. And we can skip these complex hacks and workarounds using multiple data fetching strategies just for that one this cache hit, as I showed you. So in modern Next.js, dynamic versus static is a scale. And we decide how much static we want in our apps. And as long as we follow certain patterns, we can have one mental model, which is performant, composable, and scalable by default. So let's get back to the slides. And they're here. OK, great. Yep. So if we're not already impressed by the speed of that, this is the Lighthouse score. So I collected some field data with Vercel Speed Insights. So we have a 100 score on all of the most important pages: the home page, the product page, and the product list, even though they are highly dynamic. So let's just finally summarize the patterns that will ensure scalability and performance in Next.js apps and allow us to take advantage of the latest innovations and get scores like this. So firstly, we can refine our architecture by resolving promises deep in the component tree and fetching data locally inside components using React Cache to do duplicate work. We can avoid excessive prop passing to client components by using context providers combined with React use. Second, we can compose server and client components using the dono pattern to reduce client-side JavaScript, keep a clear separation of concerns, and allow for component reuse. And this pattern will further enable us to cache our composed server components later. And finally, we can cache and pre-render with use cache, either by page, component, or function, to eliminate redundant processing, boost performance and SEO, and let partial pre-rendering statically render these segments of the app. And if our content is truly dynamic, we can suspend it with appropriate loading fallbacks. And remember that all of this is connected, so the better your architecture, the easier it is to compose, and the easier it will be to cache and pre-render with the best results. For example, resolving dynamic APIs deeper in the tree will allow you to create a bigger, partially pre-rendered static shell. And with that, this is the repo of the completed version of the application. There's like so many things that I didn't even show in there that you can check out. And you can scan the QR code to find my socials there alongside the repo if you don't want to take a picture and type it in yourself. So yeah, that's it for me. Thank you, Nextjs Conf, for having me here. Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage Sanity Principal Educator, Simeon Griggs.
Okay, I think we pretty much have to end this stream maybe after this talk. Because this stream is gonna like run.
Everyone, hello Nextjs Conf. Those who are watching online, hello internet. And to those in our Sanity Slack, hello water cooler. I'm here to talk about content operations in the age of AI-generated content. So when it comes to creating content, the scales have been tipped into the favor of people who don't care about wasting your time. When we create content without context, we know these tools don't know your audience, they don't learn, they don't get any better. And AI tools, as they're currently sold, do a really good job of convincing you that you, human, are not good enough to do the thing. You can't write an email on your own. You can't write a blog post on your own. You can't write meeting notes on your own. You can't be human without the help of AI. You're just a sack of meat that needs AI's help. And I don't think this is right. I think AI is awesome, right? It gets a superpower, it's a technology upgrade better than any that I've ever seen in my career. I'm not a doomer on this thing. It's just that I think that you're awesome too. And that's what I want to look at today. I've got a demo I'm going to show in a moment using the AI SDK, Nextjs 16, API routes and all of this, along with Sanity. So all of us get to determine what's the future going to look like, because we've got tools that look like they came and were given to us from the future, right? But we've got them now, so we get to decide what does now look like. And that's in our hands, what we'd like to do with that. So Hollywood's given us visions of the future for years, and we get to choose what do we want now to look like. There's all sorts of different visions of the future. And I know our CTO is very fond of a particular vision of the future that looks something like this. And that's what I think that working with AI can be like, particularly when we're creating content. Right? We don't just have to let the machines take over and completely cede control, but we're still in control control. We've still got our hands on the joysticks there. We can take on whatever's greater than us and take it on with absolute confidence. So before we get to the demo, let's just set the table. What's Sanity? Actually, first of all, who am I? I'm Simeon. Hello. I'm an educator at Sanity, and we've been at Nextjs Conference for a number of years, which is excellent. Sanity is a content operating system. If you've heard of Sanity, you've probably heard of it as a content management system, and that's fine. If you want to call us that, I've heard people out at the booth today saying, oh, Sanity, they're a CMS. That's fine. But we'll get to unpack why we're a bit more than that soon as well. And as I said, we've been at Nextjs Conf now for like the last 5 years, I think. Really been close to this community. We issue a lot of packages, templates, guidance. Our engineers work directly with our sales engineers to make sure that you get the very best experience. Sanity is the perfect pair with Nextjs for content-driven applications. And some of the things we've said over the journeys is we talk about structured content. So what's structured content? That means you want to store things based on what they are, not what they look like. And you might be saying, but Simeon, one of the great things about AI is that it can take just unstructured junk content and turn it into structured content. That's true, but you'll be able to do much more when you are creating a source of truth that is structured content. And actually means there's never been a better time to migrate into a system that values structured content. We've also talked about content as data for the longest time, and it's really cool to see as we've got all these new tools and the language has evolved over the journey that I suppose we could probably change some of this language and it still means the same thing. I think these days we'd say content is context. So what your company knows and what you store in your data set, that's all context that can help the AI generation process. So that's how we sort of set ourselves a little bit apart. But what's a CMS for? What's a content management system for? This has typically been the experience if you work with CMSs in the past, is that an author or a content operator, somebody on a content team, they use a CMS and they create a page. And that individual person makes individual pages, and when they need to modify those individual pages, they go and make those changes. And there's this one-to-one relationship between what it looks like on the website and this individual that works on that page. And that doesn't scale. And that's what I want to talk about today, is the ability to scale with AI tools without producing junk. So one author uses one page. And that's the experience that us developers in the room have given content creators for the longest time, right? But that's not how you and I work. You and I work more like this. So as developers, we work with source code, and we put that through a compiler, and then we serve that built content to the page, those built scripts to the page. And so we only ever concern ourselves with the source code. So that's how we work. That's not how the experience we've given to content teams. And I know because we're all very good developers and we're all getting on board with AI tools and we're all trying to impress everybody, we're moving towards a future of spec-driven development, aren't we? Aren't we? And this is the future that we're told we can go towards, that if we just keep modifying the spec and we keep modifying the PRDs, then the LLMs will create the response. And we shouldn't need to modify the response, we'll just modify the original spec. And that's the future we're heading towards. But again, you can see it's just one-way traffic. And I think that's an experience that we can give to content creators, is that if we put them in charge of creating the source content, that is what your business knows, that source of truth, those prompts, and put all of those inside of a content operating system, your authors only concern themselves with just generating lots and lots of output. And they don't have to go and click and drag individual blocks and pieces into place. If you're working with a CMS that's still based around pages, well, difficult to imagine that scaling with AI. So developers, you write source code, you and I write source code, so why can't we get our content authors to write source content? It's a future we can get towards. So instead of thinking about a content management system, what if we think about a context management system? And as somebody who writes these slides for a living, I pat myself on the back when I came up with that one. I thought it was pretty good. And then I was immediately told by one of my colleagues that I'm not the first person to say that. So anyway, so what are content operations? I've mentioned those a few times today. It's probably not entirely understood. So content operations, something like this. When you're working with a CMS, it's mostly concerned with this action here. Just you are working in something else and you copy it and you paste it into your CMS, whatever variety that is, and you hit the publish button. And that's kind of the journey of content in a CMS. But we know there's so many things that happen before we get there. There's this whole life cycle of content that happens before you get to the publish button. You are researching, writing, getting approvals, going through tasks and comments, and ideating, all of this thing. There's all this life cycle of events that are happening before you press publish. Those are all content operations. People are involved in those steps. It might not be something that you as a developer get too terribly involved with, but there's a lot of work happening there. And that's what we are largely concerned about. And not only does things happen before you press publish, there's a lot that happens after we press publish as well. So we need to kick off cache invalidation. We need to rebuild the site. We need to redeploy things, syndicate content across all sorts of systems. There's all sorts of things that need to happen in the life cycle after we press publish. And that full breadth of operations there, those are things that people are involved in doing, and that's content operations either side. And while your CMS is probably still just only ever really concerned with that thing in the middle. So sanity is for everything before and after pressing publish. I'm going to say that again for effect. Sanity is for everything before and after pressing publish. So yes, we're a CMS, sort of, we've got these pieces as a CMS. Well, I've got too much ambition to leave it there. So we created a content lake, which is like a real-time multiplayer editing data store, and we knew that we'd need to do more with that. So we built a real-time CDN. We showed that off last year, so a real-time CDN that scales massively for queries and assets. We also knew that we'd need to be able to query JSON, so we built this query language called Grok, a name that's now been co-opted by others, but it's kind of like SQL for JSON. It's an open standard that we shipped. We also ship portable text. It's an open standard for portable text and block content and rich text. And we ship an editor that's built in React and a serializer for that in a number of different languages. And we knew that once you start building out this content operations infrastructure, you'll need to be able to deploy that as code. So we built blueprints. It's like this infrastructure as code. Ability to deploy that, we knew we'd need to be able to kick off functions, to perform actions in that after cycle of after you press publish. And we knew that the Sanity Studio alone would not be enough. You'd need to build multiple applications to be able to do content authoring. So that's where we built the App SDK. And so all of these things together, this is the content operating system, where organizations that know they need to put their content into something where they can extract value from, they put it into a content operating system. We've also sort of shopped this around. I don't think it makes much more sense, but I thought I'd put it in anyway. So hang on, Simeon, I'm getting impatient. I thought this talk was about AI, and I promise I'm getting back to it. So again, if we think back in the history of Sanity's been doing this for a long time, we want humans and robots together to work together, and we always have. So for as long as the content lake concept has been around, we've always had that multiplayer editing capability. It's just that originally we thought that would be like APIs, sending edits to documents for the longest time. We didn't know that so quickly we'd have the ability to work with LLMs, and we do. But now there's this term about keeping a human in the loop, and that seems to like relegate the role of a human into like this innocent bystander role, where the robots are doing all the work and we're just in the loop. We just check in occasionally. And this seems like the wrong paradigm, I think, this human in the loop idea, where we sort of just check in occasionally while the robots create all of this. So like this is the easiest thing to make with AI content. Say I need 100,000 pages, you can very easily make 100,000 sloppy pages. And we all know AI slop. You know, you've been reading a Twitter thread and it's kind of got that weird smell to it. Like it seemed interesting at first, and then it sort of tails off. It doesn't make any sense anymore, and it's got too many M dashes, and it says it's not just X, it's Y. You can work out that there's slop, and maybe eventually we get to a point where you can't detect it, but we're not there now. So slop is like context-free. It doesn't say anything in particular about you and your organization, your goals. It doesn't convert because it's just easily dismissed. How many AI-generated images and things you just scroll past in your timeline because it's very clear. It's really easy to scale, and that's a problem. If you need to create content-driven applications at scale, this is kind of the easiest thing to do, unfortunately. But the thing to think about too is that slop's not new. We've had like human-powered slop for the longest time. I mean, I was walking past my local coffee shop the other day, and there was a picture in the window of like an AI-generated picture of brownies. They got a sale on brownies if anybody's in Whitley Bay soon. And you know, once upon a time, that would have just been clip art or like a stock photo. Or word art or something. So like we've had context-free bad content for the longest time. And the other problem is if we just use AI to generate all that content, it doesn't convert. It doesn't help to just generate huge volumes of content if it doesn't help. I don't know if anyone's been